The first revolution is when you change your mind
about how you look at
and
things.
see, there might be another way to look at it that you have not been shown.
Peace and revolutionary blessings. I am your distributor of information, the KCOG, and I am here to help you understand and abolish white supremacy. If you do not understand white supremacy, what it is, or how it works, anything and everything you believe you understand will only confuse you. That is a quote from Neil E. Fuller Jr. And we're going to kick things off today with a little... It's time for an OG Minute. Now, this is the month of May, and May 19th, 1925, 97 years ago, Brother Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz was born. So the first thing we're going to do today is kick off a little something from Malcolm, just to commemorate him and set the tone to my warning that I'm going to give you today in this program. So let's go ahead and kick that off with Brother Malcolm X.
Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies. Everybody is here. As many of you know, last March, when it was announced that I was no longer in the Black Muslim movement, it was pointed out that it was my intention to work among the 22 million non-Muslim Afro-Americans and to try and form some type of organization or create a situation where the young people, our young people, the students and others, could study the problems of our people for a period of time and then come up with a new analysis and give us some new ideas and some new suggestions as to how to approach a problem that too many other people had been playing around with for too long. And that we would have some kind of meeting and determine at a later date whether to form a black nationalist party or a black nationalist army. There have been many of our people across the country from all walks of life who have taken it upon themselves to try and pool their ideas and to come up with some kind of solution to the problem that confronts all of our people. And tonight we are here to try and get an understanding of what it is they've come up with. Also, recently, when I was blessed to make a trip or a pilgrimage, a religious pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca, where I met many people from all over the world, plus spent many weeks in Africa, trying to broaden my own scope and get more of an open mind to look at the problem as it actually is. One of the things that I realized, and I realized this even before going over there, was that our African brothers have gained their independence faster than you and I here in America have. They've also gained recognition and respect as human beings much faster than you and I. Just 10 years ago on the African continent, our people were colonized. They were suffering all forms of colonization, oppression, exploitation, degradation, humiliation, discrimination, and every other kind of Asian. And then a short time, they have gained more independence, more recognition, more respect as human beings than you and I have. And you and I live in a country which is supposed to be the citadel of education, freedom, justice, democracy, and all of those other pretty sounding words. So it was our intention to try and find out what was our African brothers doing to get results so that you and I could study what they had done and perhaps gain from that study or benefit from their experiences. And my traveling over there was designed to help to find out how. One of the first things that the independent African nations did was to form an organization called the Organization of African Unity. The purpose of our organization of Afro-American Unity, which has the same aim and objective, to fight whoever gets in our way. To bring about the complete independence of people of African descent here in the Western Hemisphere, and first here in the United States, and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary. That's our motto. The purpose of our organization is to start right here in Harlem, which has the largest concentration of people of African descent that exists anywhere on this earth. There are more Africans here in Harlem than exist in any city on the African continent, because that's what you and I are, Africans. The Charter of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Constitution of the United States, and the Bill of Rights are the principles in which we believe, and that these documents, if put into practice, represent the essence of mankind's hopes and good intentions, desirous that all Afro-American people and organizations should henceforth unite so that the welfare and well-being of our people will be assured. We are resolved to reinforce the common bond of purpose between our people by submerging all of our differences and establishing non-sectarian constructive programs for human rights. We hereby present this charter. Number one, the establishment. The Organization of Afro-American Unity shall include all people of African descent in the Western Hemisphere. In essence, what it is saying, instead of you and me running around here seeking allies in our struggle for freedom, in the Irish neighborhood or the Jewish neighborhood or the Italian neighborhood, we need to seek some allies among people who look something like we do. And once we get their allies, it's time out for you and me to stop running away from the wolf right into the arms of the fox, looking for some kind of help. That's a drag. Number two, self-defense. Since self-preservation is the first law of nature, we assert the Afro-Americans' right to self-defense. The Constitution of the United States of America clearly affirms the right of every American citizen to bear arms. And as Americans, we will not give up a single right guaranteed under the Constitution. The history of unpunished violence against our people clearly indicates that we must be prepared to defend ourselves, or we will continue to be a defenseless people at the mercy of a ruthless and violent racist mob.
Now, two things that he spoke about are very, very necessary today. The need for us to coalesce among ourselves, to come together among ourselves, to put together an agenda for ourselves is definitely in order today. And the second thing he spoke about is the right to self-defense. We had the Buffalo shooting. We had the shooting in South Carolina, and it doesn't look like it's going to stop. Okay? Which brings me to the topic for today. This is a warning. What you saw in Buffalo, these are not lone wolves. But the first thing we got to do is get our minds right. Because we have a problem in not being able to understand what's actually happening in our society. So, up next, I'm going to share a little message from Francis Cress Welsing to help us understand it is time for us to get our minds right.
If I could wave a magic wand, black people would put singing and dancing aside. We've already proven that we're the best and that we have mastered that. So we don't need any more shake booty. We really don't need any more singing. What we need is calm and quiet thinking and analysis. See, this is very important, and don't misunderstand me. I'm baptized Baptist, Christian, Methodist. You see, but there's a time and a place for singing. There's a time and a place for dancing and entertaining. But it's not in the middle of a war. It's not in the middle of a war when people are hanging nooses all around us. And the noose is not just some loop. It means kill black people.
We begin today's show looking at the crisis
I hope
of white
y'all
supremacist
get
violence.
that message. She is saying it means kill black folks. And the truth of the matter is we're still singing and dancing and shake booty, and we're not taking what we're seeing in our society very seriously. When we have these events happen in our society, we need to analyze, critically analyze, and talk about these events and understand that what we are seeing is just what she is saying. We are at war. We are at war. I have a quote that a lot of people do not know about. And let me share that with you before I get any farther into the program. And the quote is, in the final analysis, racism is evil because its ultimate logic is genocide. That is from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and that quote was published in the book, Trust No Shadows After Dark, African American Genocide in the United States by Walter Vincent Brooks. And what we're going to do real quickly is we're going to go ahead and listen to a couple of clips from Brother Brooks because he's given us a very strong warning as to what's happening. And on this first clip, just listen.
It is called Trust No Shadows After Dark, subtitled African American Genocide in the United States of America. Now, but I have a photograph of a number of high government officials, including President Lyndon Johnson, at the signing of the 1968 Kerner Commission on National Civil Disorders. They took almost 8 months to complete their investigation of all of the tremendous activity, particularly violent eruptions by the African American community after the assassination of Martin Luther King. For those of us that were alive at that time, that may have been possibly one of the most scariest times in this country in the last 50 years, for sure, because our people who were righteously outraged that this man of peace and love, who only really wanted the best for America, had been brutally gunned down. It's kind of like, well, if you don't want to work with Dr. Martin Luther King, well, who amongst black people do you want to work with? Who are you going to listen to? Now, in this photograph, I'll show it up one more time. There is a two-sentence inscription that came from the actual document, the Kerner Commission on Civil Disorders. And here's what it says. This is what they said in March 1968. Our nation is moving towards two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. Race prejudice has shaped our history decisively. It now threatens to affect our future. That is fundamentally the theme of what I'm looking at in my book. I'm basically taking a historical perspective on the African American condition. How did we get to where we are today? So I'm not just saying this is what's going on, this was wrong, this was bad, blah 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 blah. But I'm trying to capture the data. I'm trying to show this is the progression of white supremacist social policies against our people, from slavery to emancipation, all throughout the 20th century. Here we are in the 21st century. Now, this is where I think this is going to wind up. If there is not some major interventions and changes of attitude and approach, not just on behalf of white folks, black folks. Because if America goes south, and I don't mean south like the Confederacy, I mean south like Nazi Germany. We are a population that, for all intents and purposes, is still very much a captive.
Yes, very much a captive population. And what Brother Brooks is doing, he's actually sounding the alarm in his book that they've already studied this thing and they can see the comparison of what happened in Nazi Germany and the possibility of what can happen here. Just to give you a little bit more information, from the back of his book, he summarized that. It can't happen here. How many millions of European Jews must have said those very words as they watched Adolf Hitler and the Nazi human death machine fall upon them? And why is it that so many Americans really think it can never happen here? Trust No Shadows After Dark, African American Genocide in the United States of America is the conversation whose time has finally come. And I will be doing I will do an interview with Brother Brooks coming up here in the near future, where we will get into his book and kind of dissect his analysis. And you can clearly see that in this country, we are on a possible path of genocide. Okay? Now, I'm not going to get too deep into that right now. I want to go ahead and continue this warning, because we're not seeing all the signs in this society. Okay, so up next, I'm going to share another video with you. This one is going to be from Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman.
We begin today's show looking at the crisis of white supremacist violence in the United States and the response to Saturday's racist mass shooting in Buffalo, New York, where an 18-year-old white gunman killed 10 people, all African American, at a supermarket in the heart of the black community in Buffalo. On Wednesday, the House passed legislation to bolster federal resources to prevent domestic terrorism. This comes after President Biden visited Buffalo Tuesday.
Look, we've seen the mass shootings in Charleston, South Carolina, El Paso, Texas, and Pittsburgh, last year in Atlanta, this week in Dallas, Texas, and now in Buffalo, New York. White supremacy is a poison.
Okay, folks. You're actually looking at the head of white supremacy in the United States right now, okay? Because most people don't understand that the white supremacist is actually the American government. If you look at American foreign policy, if you study for real American domestic policies, you can see that the government, along with corporate America, is the white supremacist. What you saw with Buffalo is white nationalists who are terrorists. These are white national terrorists, okay? And we need to know the difference. White supremacy is a system, okay? And he is the head white supremacist.
It's a poison running through it. It really is.
Investigators say the gunman spent months plotting to carry out the mass shooting and used the online platform Discord to share details about his plot 30 minutes before the massacre. He also posted a 180-page document citing the racist so-called replacement theory. The gunman accused African Americans of seeking to, quote, ethnically replace my own people, unquote. Similar vitriol has been referenced in other racist attacks, including the violent 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, where organizers chillingly chanted, "Jews will not replace us." For more, we're joined by Amy Spitalnick, who's been described as a 21st century Nazi hunter, executive director of Integrity First for America.
Now, before Amy gets into her conversation, the Charlottesville incident is something that we have to note, because you have to understand this is where your white terrorists, your white nationalist terrorists came together in an event called Unite the Right. Okay? Now, if you have been following my program, and especially the last program that I did on the Ukraine, you will see that the Ukraine also is a white supremacist nation government, and they also have white national terrorists within their ranks. In fact, the Azov battalion is the white nationalist terrorist organization that is operating in the Ukraine. Okay, so you have to put all these pieces together. Okay, the Unite the Right, and remember, they were chanting, "We will not be replaced by Jews." This is where the replacement theory is coming from. But you also have to understand that in the 2020 census, for the first time in this country's history, the white population is showing a decline. And what you're seeing as the other side of that replacement theory is Latinos, Black, Asians, Native Americans will make up the majority of the American population here very soon. Most people have it predicted that this will be in place by 2040, 2050. But you can already see the numbers of white America is in decline. So with this, we'll let Amy get into her conversation.
She successfully sued white supremacist organizers of the violent 2017 Unite the Right rally in an effort to bankrupt them and shut them down. She's the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. Amy, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you respond to what happened in Buffalo and the way the Buffalo shooter is often described as a kind of lone wolf, troubled kid, and how you dealt with that in Virginia and what you think could be a way to begin to cope with the horror?
Thanks so much for having me. Look, what happened in Buffalo is not an isolated incident. The shooter is not a quote-unquote lone wolf. This is precisely part of a cycle of white supremacist violence in which each attack inspires the next one, made all the more dangerous by an increasingly normalized replacement theory ideology that's permeating through the Republican Party right now. And so it's impossible to separate this attack from the cycle of attacks we've seen in recent years. Charleston, Charlottesville, Pittsburgh, Poway, El Paso, January 6th to an extent fits right into this pattern. And of course now Buffalo, in addition to the record level hate crimes we've seen against so many communities, the Black community, the Asian community, and many others. And so again, it's important to understand this within that cycle. How we break that cycle requires quite a bit. And it requires a sort of accountability we saw in Charlottesville for those responsible for that violence. But you can't simply sue or prosecute your way out of this problem. It requires also building into our society systemic measures to actually get to the root of what's causing us, prevention. It requires dealing with social media companies. It requires so much more that we as a society have just failed to address, despite the warning signs that have come again and again. And of course, these horrific massacres that stay in the headlines for a few days, and then we move on. And it's so important we not move on this time.
So if you can talk about the fact that the suspect actually shared plans for the plot 30 minutes before, talk about the social media platform Discord and the parallels you see in other cases.
Well, Discord 5 years ago is where the Charlottesville neo-Nazis planned their violence in meticulous detail. They created all of these channels in which they discussed everything from what to wear to what to bring for lunch to whether they could hit protesters with cars and then claim self-defense, which is, of course, precisely what happened. The evidence in our case, which led to the verdict against the organizers of Unite the Right this past fall, illustrates just how meticulous this planning was and how central Discord was. So despite the fact that we're now nearly 5 years after Unite the Right, we now are learning that this Buffalo shooter used Discord not just in the 30 minutes leading up to the attack, but actually in advance to log his planning in a private chat and then opened it up to a more public audience just beforehand. And what this tells us is that despite claims from Discord that they care about addressing extremism, 5 years after Unite the Right, 5 years after their platform was first exploited to plan horrific white supremacist violence, the same thing has happened again. And it's not just Discord, although they are sadly a perfect example right now.
Who are they owned by?
I believe that they are owned by them. I believe that they are a self-sufficient organization. I could be wrong. But they are part of a broader tech community that has washed its hands of its responsibility to deal with white supremacist violence and other extremism that's running rampant on its platform. Just this morning, NBC News reported that the shooter learned how to outfit his gun on YouTube, and some of those videos are still up there. And so this is a problem that we know is systemic among social media companies, that after attack after attack, nothing has been done to sufficiently deal with this. And it's not just the sites.
The significance of him live streaming and where he did that.
Well, live streaming is a common tactic by white supremacist extremists. We've seen this in multiple attacks, including the Christchurch massacre, which targeted the Muslim community in New Zealand a few years ago and seemingly inspired this attack. And it's important to understand that this is a deliberate tool by white supremacists, not just to achieve the sort of glory many of them want in the fight for their people as they see it, but also to perpetuate this cycle of violence in which each attack inspires the next one. We know, for example, that the Pittsburgh shooter who killed 11 Jews praying in a synagogue there a number of years ago talked to some of the Charlottesville leaders before his attack. The Christchurch shooter donated to some of our Charlottesville leaders and painted onto his gun a white power symbol that was first popularized by another one of our defendants. Christchurch was live streamed and in turn inspired Poway, El Paso, and now Buffalo. And you see how this cycle continues, in which these supposed lone wolves are taking deliberate steps, not just to, of course, undertake the sort of massacre we saw in Buffalo last weekend, but make sure that someone looking on can be inspired to do the same.
And then the role of Facebook.
The role of Facebook is incredibly important to understand, because that's frankly one of the sites so many average Americans are on. There was a piece of evidence in our Charlottesville lawsuit, an email that was sent from Facebook to the neo-Nazi organizers of Unite the Right the evening of the Torch March, encouraging them to boost their posts, which promoted the Torch March and Great Replacement theory. The fact that the algorithm at Facebook is directly encouraging promotion of this sort of white supremacist extremism is a perfect example of how broken the system is. And no matter what Facebook tells you that they're trying to do to address this, we're again years after the fact with little change.
I'm going to stop it right there, because you heard me say that corporate America was a part of this whole process, and that the system itself is the government and corporate America. And what she just said right there actually backs that statement up. Facebook, Discord, and these other social media companies are allowing this kind of hate to take place on their platforms and are not reporting this stuff, and are at least trying to shut it down, if nothing else. They are not doing it. Okay? So we have to be clear on what's actually happening here. And that's why I'm doing this particular program as a warning, because we have to be clear that this is what's happening. And in the next thing I'm going to share with you guys, you will see that this is also international. Okay? I told you about the Ukraine. All right? Now you're going to hear some more about international and what they're doing with the white nationalist terror groups across the sea, across the ocean. Here we go.
This man survived a white supremacist massacre. Bjorn Eiler jumped into a lake during a mass shooting in Norway. 77 people were killed in the 2011 bombing and shooting that's become a model for far-right killers.
It's always painful and devastating to see these attacks, and also brings up memories of my own survival.
Today, he works to prevent future attacks.
It's kind of depressing to some extent that the 2011 attack didn't have a greater impact in the world's realization of the real security threats posed by the violent white supremacist far right.
In 2011, a far-right killer murdered 8 people with a bomb in Oslo and 69 others in a shooting on the island of Utøya. Before the attack, he published a document listing his grievances about immigration, Islam, and feminism. While white supremacist attacks are nothing new, the Norway attacks marked a shift.
2011 seemed to kick off a new wave of this kind of violence that was highly globalized, highly technologically organized, connected internationally, and that was willing to engage in high-profile, extreme violence. And it's really been part of this disturbing evolution that we've seen over the past 10 years.
Globally, there's been a 320% increase in right-wing attacks in the 5 years leading up to 2020. Several attackers, including the Christchurch shooter and the Munich Mall shooter, drew inspiration from the Norway attacks.
We see Tarrant in New Zealand was inspired by Breivik and references Breivik directly in his manifesto. We saw New Zealand inspiring other attacks, and so it kind of becomes a snowball almost of attacks inspired by each other in different ways, and also building on this shared white supremacist ideology.
While white supremacist attackers have long been labeled lone wolves by the media, experts can see how the attacks are linked.
We also understand far-right extremism, recently white supremacy, now more as an international phenomenon. We've tended to view it, particularly in Western countries, as a domestic issue, and we've had bad legislation really on domestic terrorism a lot of the time, where you can't tie it to an international grid. It wouldn't necessarily be ruled as terrorism in court. While these networks are somewhat loosely existing, they are still networks. They're still drawing on inspiration from each other. They're still communicating with each other and coordinating.
But although people share far-right material online, they don't often carry out large-scale international attacks. Instead, they target local communities of color.
So, for instance, you had everything from the Atlanta spa attacks to, just targeting of Black churches in Charleston. It's important to focus on the connection, but also realize that what's inspiring and continuing these attacks is a normalization of violent racism, rhetorically, politically, and socially against Black people, Asian communities, immigrants, Muslims, women, and queer people.
13 months after the Norway massacre, the attacker was sentenced to 21 years in prison, the maximum sentence in Norway. However, the sentence can be extended as long as he is considered a danger to the public. He's eligible to seek parole after serving 10 years of his term. Eiler says it's painful to hear of other far-right attacks around the world.
The worst part of it for me is really the knowledge that I have of what the survivors and the victims will have to go through. These attacks are leaving people's lives in ruins, and they're going to have to rebuild that. There is a lack of availability of resources for psychological welfare or supporting survivors of these horrendous events. You see it in Norway, where 1/3 of the people who were affected by the 2011 attack are still significantly struggling, according to recent reports. We're seeing it in the aftermath of Christchurch, where there are similar reports of people still struggling now 2 years later.
Over the last decade, far-right rhetoric in politics has become more mainstream around the world.
I think pretty much every Western country right now is further to the right, further to the anti-immigration, anti-diversity rhetorics and politics than what they were in 2011. That's quite disappointing to see.
But Eiler says there are things that regular people can do to help prevent these kinds of attacks.
We can push back when we see people having problematic perspectives. We can have constructive discussions with people.
There's a lot of really great training that many of the AAPI organizations have put on in the aftermath, particularly the Atlanta spa shootings, of what to do if you see someone being harassed. Stopping white supremacist violence for individuals doesn't mean planning for the next big attack. It means focusing on everyday normalized realities of white supremacy that really enable these kinds of large-scale attacks.
The world needs to reassess how we are dealing with the victims and survivors of these terrorist attacks, how we are supporting them in rebuilding their lives, because these attacks do happen, and it's devastating that they do.
We're gonna wrap that right there. And you saw that even in pretty much all white countries, they're still doing these far-right, white nationalist terrorist attacks, even on people that look like them. And I do believe these were people who may have a difference in religion is why they were attacked in Norway. Now, I got a couple of more things I need to discuss with you. And the first one is, let's take a look and let's consider some things that went down with the Buffalo shooter and Peyton Grenron. Number one, like Kyle Wittenhouse and Dalen Roof, he is young, 18 years old. Are they part of a white terrorist cell? Number two, military-style weapon and dress. Who trained and radicalized Grenron, and the same with Roof and Rittenhouse? Who's radicalizing these young people? Number three, you heard that he recorded on live stream, but no one's talking about who was his target audience on the live stream. Was he again live streaming to a white terrorist cell? Number four, he, like Dalen Roof, has a manifesto. Okay, guys, do you honestly think these kids wrote a 180-page manifesto? Do you honestly believe they wrote it? After what I showed you tonight in the connection to the Unite the Right rally, and the international terrorism that is going on with these white nationalist terrorists. Number five, you heard him talk about the Unite the Right was actually organized through Discord. And this kid, Grenron, also used Discord as he made his plans before and during the shooting. Who was he communicating with? Again, are these white terrorist cells? We have to start thinking about this, because how can we build self-defense for our community without having answered these questions and knowing what to look for in the future? Well, one of the things that we need to look for in the future is this. Okay? When you see this type of dress happening in your neighborhood by white men or women, you have to think if they are a terrorist. Now, you couple this with an AR-15 strapped across their chest, you have the answer. They are terrorists. Okay? And what we need to do is be on guard that this type of dress, when we see it, sets off a red flag or an alarm in our head. What is this person doing in our community? Dress like this. We have to consider these things. We really must consider these things. Now, moving on, I'm just going to briefly touch on the subway killings that are the subway shootings that went down in New York. There was something very odd about that story. And the thing that was very odd about that story is the older guy that did that really was not out to kill. It was like he was more out to maim or make a point. But what was his motive? That hasn't come out at this time. That's what makes this strange. Okay? The other strange part of this is the police couldn't find that guy. He called and turned himself in and then had to call him back and tell him where he was. That is very odd. Now, the next one is the shooting in Texas. Now, as the information is coming out about this shooting, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Number one, why did the police wait outside knowing there was an active shooter on the inside? Doesn't make sense. Number two, what was this kid's motive? He was also Hispanic or Latino. And the majority of the people that he shot wasn't even his age. They were grade school kids. What was his motive to do that? Okay. The other thing is that in the Buffalo shooting, in the South Carolina shooting with Daylan Roof, and with several other mass killings, the police were able to take the shooter alive. Okay? Now, my understanding is that the police killed this young boy that did the shooting in Texas. Okay? But again, what is his motive? Why did the police wait so long to enter the building and to confront the shooter? You got to ask these things. And today I saw a very interesting video on YouTube. I don't know if I can find that video at this point, but there was some issues with the translation where they're saying that the way the media translated his mother speaking about her son. Now, keep in mind, this shooter killed his grandmother before he went to the school and started shooting. And now we have his mom coming out saying something similar to the fact that he wasn't right in the head. Now, the way that the media actually translated this, it's like she was saying there was something not right about him. But I saw the video, and unfortunately I didn't save that video, so I can't give it to you today. But if you speak Spanish and you heard that interview where the mother speaking in Spanish, this guy was saying, and for those of you who speak Spanish, I want you to confirm, because I know the dialect is different, just like it is in English, and whatever part of the country you're in, it's a little different. But it seems like the mother was trying to say that there wasn't something right with this kid in the head, that he was off in the head. Okay? Now, that to me throws up a red flag. And even the guy in the video who retranslated this thing mentioned the possibility of MK Ultra. Now, for you who don't believe in brainwashing, I have done a whole series on that. and have shown you that brainwashing is real, that even MK Ultra was a real government program. And for you who don't believe that, you need to go do your research. But what if? Because again, what was this kid's motive? You got to ask the question. What was his motive to go into an elementary school and kill these young kids like that? And we have no motive whatsoever that was given to us about these killings. So in the future, I may dig a little deeper into that and present on that again. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up right now and leave it right here because, again, I believe there was something off about that shooting. It's very off, you know. The good guys with guns sat outside when they should have and heard the shooting going on the inside. So why did they delay in going in? Okay. And of course, the Texas government response to all this is a little bit quirky. It's a little bit strange. It's like, look, y'all, don't y'all get it? We got crazy folks with guns killing children. So I'm not going to get too deep into that. I'm going to leave it right there. But hopefully the information that I shared with you today will heed the warning that I'm trying to give the black community, that there is some things that we need to be on point about, and there is a need for us to have some serious conversations on how we are going to organize politically and for self-defense. And with that, I'll see you guys in about a week. I'm out of here. Peace and revolutionary blessings to all of you. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. And while I'm on that subject of Memorial Day, to all those who served in the service and gave their lives to their families, I am sorry that they died for this imperialist, capitalist country. Okay? I am very sorry that they died for them. But it is time, and this is part of the conversation the black community needs to have. It is time that we move away from militarism and war. And I know the capitalists in this country, the corporate Americas in this country, the Lockheed Martins and the other companies that make weapons and guns and helicopters and boats and ships. I know people are making a good living off of this, but it's time for us to shut down the military industrial complex. It's time for it to be shut down. We are spending more money for war than for anything else in this country. And if you haven't been paying attention, the homeless situation across this nation is shameful, outright shameful. Peace, revolutionary blessings. We'll see you in a week.
Stress.